I feel like when you're a gardener, you always want more of what you don't have. I don't know if that's like you too, but for me it sometimes is whether I want citrus, but I live in Iowa, can't grow it in the ground, so I do it in containers. For me, it's also shade. I don't have a lot of shade. I live out more in the prairie part of Iowa where it's pretty flat, big horizons, and while I have some nice trees around my property and farm here, not enough to give me too much shade. So you're looking at my one shade area and you're looking at some of the plants I love because I'm actually gonna add a few in more today. So this area, when I moved in, there was no plants here. It was some grass that obviously wasn't doing well because it was under a big old maple tree and a big old crabapple tree. And this area, Grandma never really had plants. She always had just kind of grass. And if you remember this pathway I just put in a few years ago. So this bed has really been evolving in the last few years. And I've really been able to utilize some of my favorite shade plants. Now, again, I didn't grow up with a lot of shade either. So shade plants are one of those that I've always craved, but never been able to do a lot of. Shade can really be broken into two categories, a dry shade or more of a wet shade. I think we often view shade as always gonna be slightly wet. It's not the case. My shade always happened to be dry shade, both where I grew up across the road and here. And that's because we have, right now you can tell, dry, hot wind in the summer, even though it's still spring. This can kind of be a drying out wind, but also maple trees have usually a little bit more shallow roots and kind of really suck that moisture out. And it really is just an area where it doesn't necessarily stay wet. My property, all of my farm drains really well, which can be both a blessing and a curse at different times of the year. So I utilize plants that can kind of be in between those two things. It's not always perfect, but I'm gonna talk about those today. One of my favorites we're gonna start with is Aurelia. So I usually talk about Sun King Aurelia, but there's also this one, which is pretty much its best friend, called Gotemba. It really looks the same, acts the same. It can get a little bit bigger. Gotemba though, you can tell, look at this gorgeous foliage. It's that chartreusey yellow green foliage that does so well. And really what's great about it is it does have a little bit of a bloom, but it's not really what you grow it for. You grow it for this texture. And what you can see behind me is, do you see that texture back here? It just shows up and it's highlighted all from different parts of the yard. I can see this beautiful Aurelia here. It really highlights well with hosta, which hosta do like a little bit more moisture. So you can see here I do have some drip line. I'll come in here a little bit closer and show you. But what I do first want to show you is I always start with well-watered plants whenever I'm planting anything. And I hadn't gotten a chance to water these yet today. So I'm gonna water them right now before I plant them. Anytime I'm gonna put a plant into the soil, I want it to be well watered because I think one, that's just, you want that plant to start off in the soil to have good moisture. But also I think a plant always receives water better later on as it's being watered if it starts well watered. So you can see if you're going down here, kind of, I'm gonna mimic the same, I would say this side of this bed I keep a little bit more formal, where I'm kind of going every other with a Sege, hosta, and then one of these Aurelia, and they're all the Gotemba varieties. So these right now are going into their third season, and they all started at this size. So you can see they really do grow pretty well. And what's great about them is once they're established, they can be fairly drought tolerant. So obviously you need to get it through those first few seasons, but then they can really take on some of the dry weather that summers can bring me here in Iowa, which is what I really like. So if you want to look up a little closer at it here, you can see it right here. This is the one, I'm gonna plant actually 2 of these, just because I do. They're deciduous, they're perennial, they will die back to the ground every year, but they get such nice tall growth year after year. And then this is the hosta, which honestly, I'm gonna be honest here. The reason I started with this hosta, you can see it was $12.99. I think it's a great price. Also, it's just one I got a few years ago. It's not that I think it's, you know, the absolute best, but I do like how it has that slight color variation on the edge that goes really well with this. It also just happened to be one that I could find easily, and I'm really not picky on hosta. I have some that are just kind of the old standards that I took from Mom Little Starts, and I have some that I've purchased. But honestly, it's kind of, there's so many varieties that if you can find the ones that are the size you like, that do well. This one too, all of mine started that size, and you can see now, going on to their third season, how nice and big these are. So I do have drip line here. A few years ago, I invested and had drip line put in professionally, so it comes to all my different beds that I need it in under the ground, and then I can control it from my phone or from a controller, and I'm able to kind of just say, you know, how much time, how often per week, things like that. And then I will come out still and check it, because the thing is, you know, you never know for sure, unless you're coming out and checking things, how well watered something is actually getting. Anytime I plant under a tree, you can tell here I was testing it a little bit. You know, the roots here obviously are going to be the issue. So it's not always the best scenario to plant under certain trees, but this is the one area of shade I get, so I am going to plant here, and I'm going to try to enjoy it as much as I can. You know, for years here, when we went through about 3 years of extreme drought, my hosta suffered tremendously. I put sprinklers out just to keep them alive, but they never thrived. Now, last year we had great rain. I really didn't need to use my drip at all. We had pretty consistent rains that I would have been more used to at one time. So it just kind of depends on the year, but what I also have to watch for is where are their roots, because sometimes that can be more the issue. So that's what I was checking when I was digging here, but I should be pretty good, it feels like right here. Every so often, if it's a small enough root, I will go through it. You can feel there's a small one there, and I'm not worried. Now, if I would get to too big of root, I would pick a different spot. Thankfully, I want this to be in that same vein and have these kind of be in a row. So this area is gonna work just fine. Now you can see here my soil, it's really beautiful. I have great soil. It's nice and loamy, it's nice and rich. This year what I did on this bed, I put a whole about 1 inch or 2 inch layer of my homemade compost over this whole bed. Now, I let the leaves that were on it from the previous year, so any of the leaves that came off the tree, I didn't blow them out or anything, I just left them here. I put compost directly over them because they're going to continue to compost in. In some ways, I know that I'm not a perfect gardener. I don't need things to be absolute perfection and prim and proper. I love to think that I'm helping my soil and enriching it the most I can year after year. I don't know if you agree, but I think sometimes we get so uptight about having perfect looking things and mulching it perfectly every year that it doesn't always benefit the soil the best. So I am gonna add biotone because you know I love it. It benefits the soil, but it also helps those roots really get going. And that to me is what is perfect. Anytime we're gonna do something, add to your soil as much as you can. Have it be your homemade compost, purchased good compost. You know I love the Espoma Land and Sea Compost. Always use biotone when you're transplanting, planting something new. Honestly, when I started using it years ago, it's amazing the things I do notice it on. Now you're gonna tell, these are not too they're not root bound or anything, so I'm really not gonna break them up too much. I really only go in and scarify the roots if things are really tight and encircling each other. And now I can tell this is very well watered, I can feel the weight of it, and it's saturated all through. And even though I just watered it, yes, I'm going to again, I wanna make sure to get any of those air bubbles out and just make sure it has great saturation to start off. Same procedure when I'm planting my hosta, biotone. Hosta do like a slightly acidic fertilizer or an acidic area sometimes. Now, obviously my soil here on my farm, it's not acidic, it's neutral. It has great soil structure, it has great topsoil, but it does not really have acidity. So I will sometimes come in and fertilize these with Hollytone. And sometimes when I plant a new hosta, I will put that in the hole too, along with the biotone. Today I just don't have it with me, so we're not gonna do it. And that's okay, because what I'll do later is come in and amend with it a little bit. But this is right here next to drip line, which I like. The hosta, you can tell the ones that do really well are probably the ones that are really next to the drip line. So to me, you can tell already that that is making a huge difference. And I'm gonna put one more, this beautiful Aurelia. You know, this area, I had a container the last few years here, kind of a small concrete container, and it just wasn't really making me happy. So I removed that. I put one terracotta container at the end, and I'm loving how these look here so much that I decided this is the perfect time to be able to add more in. Now what I will probably do, especially with the Aurelia, this one is really close to a drip line, but what I will probably do is put a separate emitter right to it. So this is probably a 2 gallon per hour, which when I have this on, I don't even have it on a full hour. So I will probably put this directly on it, maybe put one on that one too, just so I don't have to worry about it during the heat of the summer. You know, drip line is a new thing for me. I did not grow up with drip line. Honestly, we usually always assumed the rain would water our plants. We didn't really worry too much about it. Kind of since I've been living here, but the last few years especially have been much more volatile, that in order for me to be able to keep up with my yard and be just me, having a drip line is what has helped me be able to do that. Now, like I said last year, I hardly had to use it, which was really nice. That's what, of course, I would love, but these are now all planted. So the fun part about this is it's fun to have color and shade. It's also fun to have something a little bit different than just hosta. I love hosta. Some of them are starting to really thrive, but it's fun to be able to add in something that's a little bit outside the box. I have epimedium in front. That's again something that does really well in dry shade once it's established. So it's starting to kind of fill in, and I want that to fill in as a ground cover all along the front. To me, if I can always cover as much soil of a flower bed as possible, that's less weeding. Because anytime there's exposed soil, even if it's mulched, over time there's gonna be weeds. So if I can cover it with plants, that to me is always gonna make me happy. But we're gonna do some full sun plants too. The shade area is really one of those spots that's been really fun for me to start this path when I walk it or when I work along, and I really enjoy kind of coming up. But what's fun about it is it soon transitions into full sun. So I'm able to kind of really experience and expose a lot of different plantings that I really enjoy. So you can see on this side is more of a prairie style. We have lots of baptisia, lots of drop seed grasses. But then as we go around the corner, you get lots more color and texture going all the way down. But right here in this little corner, I have a couple willow chairs. I really like these. A local artisan made them. And they're really fun. Sometimes I bring my coffee out here in the morning and just sit. But it's also a spot I want to plant another Agastache. So we're gonna plant two different types of Agastache. I just found a new one to me at a local nursery. So I was like, okay, I need to plant some of that because I love Blue Fortune Agastache, which is what I have a lot of. So I'm gonna first show you what that one is. So right here is what we're gonna plant right now first, which this one I put in a few years ago along this path, and I'll go show you how it's looking now. It's a Blue Fortune. What I love about it is not only do pollinators love it, it has great flowers, the smell of it is so good. Now, even if you don't like black licorice, it just has a slight anise smell that to me is just reminiscent of, well, pepper nuts that I make at Christmas. You know, those cookies my grandma always made? It kind of smells like that, but it also just has a really herbal smell that I like. So that's a new plant. It's a 1 gallon size. But if we go around the corner, right here are ones that are going into their 3rd year. Look how pretty they are. What I like is they almost have this slight blue or purple tinge on their new growth. Do you see that darkness on the leaf as it comes out? And then soon enough, here in probably a month, they'll be in full bloom. Pollinators will be loving them. They will be just a buzz with all different types of pollinators. So I have groups of 5 every so often going down this path. But right here I have a couple on this side. On that side, I think I have like 1, and I just want to dot in another one, or there's not even 1 over here. So that just makes my symmetry feel, for some reason, not quite right. So right now I have 2 there. I'm gonna at least bring 1 in for now here, just so I can have a little bit of that. There's some Rudbeckia behind it. I just put in a few plugs of Summer Magic, Catmint or Nepeta. So it's really kind of a fun area, but I just feel there's a hole right there, and it's gonna fill in perfectly. Most of the perennial plantings I put around my path usually are ones that I want to naturalize a little bit. Recently I did take out the Calamint. So I have found there are 2 types of Calamint. Montrose White was one that I planted all along the back of my shed, and I really liked that variety. It stayed in a nice clump. The clump got bigger, but it never really reseeded, which I wouldn't mind if it did a little bit. But then I couldn't really find it, so I just planted straight Calamint in a lot of groupings going down this path, and it reseeds profusely. So that one I have recently decided to slowly eradicate, which I think will take me the rest of my life. I dotted in little plug starts of Summer Magic, Nepeta or Catmint, and then you can see already here, see all those little green things? Even in my pathway. Those are the Calamint starts, which I don't mind. You know, Rudbeckia definitely reseeds, and I have a lot more Rudbeckia. The Baptisia can reseed, but nothing does quite at the rate of the Calamint. So I want them to kind of do it at the same rate so they can compete with each other as opposed to just take over. Just to tell you, that's a little side note. The straight variety of Calamint for me is not right. And you know, that's the thing. We're each gonna find different things that work well for us. And while I want everything here to naturalize and just kind of have new plants that keep growing, I don't want one plant just to take over. So as we're walking down the path, this right here is the delineation of what is in its only 2nd season versus what is going into its 3rd season. So everything back behind me is now going into its 3rd season. And right here at the end of that tree line is where I just planted everything last year. About exactly 1 year ago now is when I put in all these perennials, and look how good they look. You have texture, you have color, and we are only getting the beginning. So soon the Rudbeckia Goldstream rudbeckia will be blooming, lots of yellow. There's going to be Culver's root, there's going to be mountain mint, sanguisorbia, all those things. And I just in a different video planted all the small starts of things up in there. So soon enough, you're going to be seeing lots more here, which I'm really excited. But this is where you can see, again, I have a hole right back in there. And that is a woodward arborvitae, that small shrub. It will someday be like this big row back there. That's a hedge row of woodward arborvitae. It looks small, but in all honesty, it's the only one I could find. And all of these started that size in around 2016, I believe. So 9 or 10 years ago, I put those in, and look what they look like now. They're around, most of them are up to about 6 foot, which is really nice. So in this hole though, right here, I'm gonna be planting just to kind of cover up some of, I don't know, it's just kind of boring. A new to me Agastache. So again, I'm really excited about this. It's called Mint to Be Queen Nectarine. I'm sorry, I didn't even show you well. What I like about it is it gets about the same size. So the Blue Fortune also gets, I think, 36 to 48. This one says about 36 inches max. So it's gonna be close to the same size. It likes full sun, and I do find that with all Agastache, they do like full sun. They can take some slight shade, but I think a couple of them that are tucked in underneath some of these trees get a little too much shade, and they don't do quite as well as the ones that are more out in full sun. So these, you can tell, they're gonna be in full sun, lots of hot air during the summer, which is gonna be great for them. What I'm excited about is they have a completely different color. So they have, I mean, a more nectarine type color, which I even notice when I smell the leaf, it smells slightly different. It's a smaller leaf too, which I think is really fun, but it has kind of that same coloring. It reminds me of a Caradonna salvia stem. See how you get a little bit of purple variation? Right here we have Caradonna salvia that has, oh, look at the happy bees on it right now. But you can see how it also has that purple stem. This isn't quite as dark, but it just kind of reminds me of that, so I'm really excited to try it. A lot of you lately have been asking, do you draw out everything when you do it? Do you always have a master plan? Yes and no. So in this long pathway, before I did it, I did draw up, I like to think to scale. I'm not gonna say it was perfectly to scale, but in the past I have worked in landscape design for a while, and I also just kind of, since I was young, dabbled in it. So I did draw up a rough plan, and it mostly worked out correctly. I think what you have to remember with perennials is they take a little while to come into their size. To me, usually just about 1 to 2 seasons. And honestly, most of these have been 1 season they come to their full size. So when you plant them at first, it's gonna feel like you have a lot of open space, but in time you really don't. So on this whole area, I wanted everything to in turn start growing into each other, just because I wanted total soil coverage. And you can see there's still a few open spots where some of the plants aren't quite as big, but I want them to eventually grow into each other and be full, because that's going to shade out any weeds. It's going to cover the soil completely. I don't plan on mulching this after it was first mulched last year or a few years ago on the rest of the bed. So all this, what I do is I do a chop and drop method, where every spring I leave the foliage all winter, just don't touch it. And then in the spring, when the temperatures are about right, I come out with my push mower. If any stems are too woody, I do chop them by hand just to chop them down to the ground. And then I use my push mower and I just self-mulch it. It doesn't blow it out the side, it just keeps it underneath and it chops it up and it drops it. So then you're pretty much creating your own mulch every year that creates its own compost, and it's just really what I like. So all the perennials I pick for here are for that. They do well in full sun. They're just kind of a nice perennial like that. So what I kind of do is space things in groupings of usually 5 or 7. I'm gonna admit, for the ease, I bought 6 of them, so we're gonna put 6 in, which isn't necessarily, like, I always like to think odd numbers feel better, but we're doing an even number, friends, and that's just how it's gonna work out, unless I decide to put one somewhere else. So I'm kind of, if you notice, offsetting them. I kind of do that to begin with. I had transplanted a small start of a different Baptisia I had somewhere else. They hate being transplanted, by the way, but you can do it. They just look mad for a while. So what I'm doing here is just spacing them out. And I think I am just gonna put all 6 like this, because what's nice is this hole, which this arborvitae will keep growing a little bit, but this is gonna fill in this hole, which I really like. We have some beautiful Joe Pye weed here. We have Carl Forster grass. And what I'm gonna do later on this season is I'm gonna put a split rail fence in back here, just so it kind of feels, you can still see through it, which I like, because you can see my prairie that way. But I want a delineation between these 2 areas. So this is a perfect spot. You can see there is drip line here, which is great because in the beginning here, when they're brand new, they obviously are gonna need to be watered. I of course try to just bring some of this mulch back. Last year when I put mulch down, I only put down about, I think it was 2 inches, maybe 3. Now, honestly, to me, this is staying, well, no, that's about nice. Once you get underneath, it's about the right moisture level. That's the one thing I want to check. Usually what I do is, if we go through a dry spell, I'll have this drip line on and water it some, especially for new plantings. But then I'm going to be honest, the first year that I planted any of these type of perennials, all drought tolerant, all sun loving, I watered them during a drought for about 1 to 1.5 months. And I was watering them about 2 to 3 times a week. Then I stopped watering them and they thrived, even in drought, even when they were brand new. So that's what I want with everything I plant here. And I will turn the drip line off here very soon. But I want things like this and some of my new trees I planted to be watered for a while. So I'm putting biotone in the hole. You know, Agastaki, what's great about them, they don't, now these are a little bit tighter because they're an aggressive grower. So these I will break up a little bit more. What's great about Agastaki, they don't need a lot of fertilizer. They don't need a lot of kind of help. So to me, what's great, biotone isn't necessarily just this like strong fertilizer. It just helps their roots get acclimated and gives them exactly what they need. So that's the best part. I'm choosing things that thrive in good soil. This is great soil to start. I had amended it all with compost when I created this bed. So it's ready to go and I don't need to worry about these year after year. Biotone to start, compost to amend if I ever want to, and they're happy. So you can see from here now, all 6 are planted. What I really like is that they're gonna fill in this spot pretty well. Think about it. They get, 32, I think they could get up to 36 inches high for sure. And when you think about that, that's gonna look really good in this area because as we back up, those grasses right now are probably just about 3 foot. They'll get a little bit taller. So think of that height next to here. And as that woodward arborvitae becomes even bigger, it's going to have a nice spot back there that really starts to help hide some of the road a little bit. And that's kind of the whole point, is for all this to fill in and just be this great backdrop that above you see the horizon from. Okay, I didn't really finish my story about garden planning. So as you can see, yes, I do plan. A lot of this was planned out. You have groupings that repeat all the way down. My thing is repeating lots of pattern all throughout so it feels more comfortable to the eye. It also feels like it is more thought out. When you have repeating groups of plantings that have bigger impact, because from a distance you see the big color as opposed to just one plant, I think it really makes it feel thought out and planned, even when not too much planning went into it. But that said, sometimes then I'm left with a hole because I must have never really planned on what was going there. So that to me is just a fun spot to try something new. And while it isn't going to have any repeating yet, if I like it, and actually I bought all 6 that were there. So if they get more in, maybe I'll dot some more in kind of along the beginning of the pathway up there just so there's some cohesion. But if not, I think it's fun to try some plants. So you can see as we walk down, look at all this color and texture that is really coming in. What's great is, as I sit in my office on the 2nd floor of my house, and I'm writing my recipe posts, as I'm writing garden posts, this is what I'm able to see during the growing months. And it's just a sea of color and texture. And that to me is what I've always craved. I've always craved to have an area that I could actually visually enjoy from the house, because so many of my areas are closed off from the house that you don't see. So hopefully today is inspiring, I don't know, maybe to try some new plants, maybe to try some groupings of plants, because you notice I always usually plant more than one or have multiple. Like that hosta, I had quite a few of them already there. So I hope it maybe inspires you to do the same, or just show you a little bit of method to my madness, because you know what? You always need a little bit of madness in your garden, but I'm gonna keep on working, have a little bit more watering to do of some stuff I planted, and hopefully just watch it grow.